Well, here we are in Newark, New Jersey, and we're visiting with my good friend and fellow Wolfhound, Paul Naso. Paul,
John?
first of all, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking the time out and driving here to be with us today. And of all the guys that I served with, you probably have one of the most interesting stories. So as we go through this, I'm very excited to have you tell us about your story in Vietnam.
Well, I just want to thank you also, John, for everything you do for us, and what you're doing with these interviews is a great thing.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
And one of the questions that I ask right up front is where you were born and raised,
Okay.
which is, where were you born and
I was
raised?
born in New York City, Queens, Borough, Queens, and in a town called Richmond Hill,
Okay,
1948, January 11th.
okay. And then I always like to find out what your folks were like and what your family was like. And I
Okay.
think you wanted to kind of talk to them
Right.
and so forth about that.
Well, first of all, you guys know I was diagnosed with leukemia about 2 years ago. It'll be 2 years this coming May. And I just want to thank my family for tremendous support during this time. My wife, Donna, my lovely wife, Donna, my daughter, Laura, my sons, Paul, his wife, Shelby, my son, Brian, his wife, Gina, and the most beautiful person in the world, my granddaughter, Sienna.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, for all their support over these past 2 years. And I also want to give a shout out to Dick and Mary Ann Glover. Dick has called me every single day since I was diagnosed. Like I said, almost 2 years, he calls me every single day. But yeah, so my dad was a World War II vet. He was in France, I guess around 1944, right before the war ended in Europe. And my mom worked in the factories during the war, the war factories. And she was a seamstress, and that's what she did. And, we grew up in Richmond Hill, which was a nice little town in the, borough of Queens, New York City. So
What was it like growing up as a kid? How was your childhood?
it was good. We had a nice, close-knit neighborhood. A lot of friends. We played softball, we played baseball, basketball, you name it, football. We did everything as a kid growing up.
When you were a kid, did they do sandlot ball? I mean, just on the corner off the street?
Yeah, we used to do
played a lot of different.
We used to play a lot of different games.
Yeah.
On the street corners, punch ball, stick ball, a wiffle ball. We played basketball. Not a big soccer neighborhood, but we played a little soccer, but mostly baseball and basketball.
Where'd you go to high school?
Richmond Hill High School.
Okay. And was that, did you have a lot of fun in high school? Was that a good experience?
Yes, it was. Had a lot of girlfriends.
You know what?
Excuse me, my wife, Donna.
No, this is like ESP. That was my next question. I'm serious.
Oh,
That
yeah.
was just on the tip of my tongue. I was going to say that. So so you were.
Great experience in high school. I graduated in 1965, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, but I worked in a supermarket, big chain in New York at that time was Bohack Supermarket, so it was a competitor to A&P. And, I did that for a while, and then I went into the city through an employment agency, and I got into data processing, okay? Before I went
Now, for people that don't understand that, if I recall, wasn't there cards involved?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this goes way back,
This is
right?
early stages of mainframe
Exactly.
computers, and we did the punch cards and so forth, and we used to have to read the cards into a card reader, which then was transmitted to tape, and then they'd mount the tapes up, and they'd run jobs against those tapes for the financial side of the business. I worked for Ross Perot's company, EDP, Electronic Data Processing, until I went into the service. When I went into the service and I was drafted,
My next
Okay.
question is what, first of all, did you never want to go to college? Was that not even in your thinking?
It was in my thinking, but I never got there. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
You know, my dad wasn't doing too well at that point in time. He had emphysema and he wasn't feeling that well.
Okay.
So I kind of like stayed home with my mom to help out with my dad.
Yeah, okay. And so now you're kind of getting rocking and rolling here. You got a job and you're learning stuff, and all of a sudden, one day you get a letter from the
In
government.
1967, it was probably the middle of December of 1967, I got my draft notice to report, I think it was the first week in January 1968.
Okay. What was your initial feeling when you read that letter?
You know, it's funny, there was some other guys in the neighborhood that got drafted before me, all right? So I kind of knew it was going to come, the letter. But I was very apprehensive, you know, nervous, scared, you know, typical feelings, I guess, for a guy going into the service. And, but, you know, I had a long talk with my dad. I remember having a long talk with my father in regard to my responsibility and my accountability as far as being a soldier. And he told me, just listen, do what you got to do. He says, I don't understand the war, which he didn't,
Yeah.
or my mother for that matter. And we just went along with, you know, with his guidance. And I said, Dad, I'll do the best I can. And so, again, I reported in January of '68 to Fort Hamilton in Brooklyn, and I got sworn in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, I went to, we took a flight out to South Carolina. I went to Fort Jackson, and that for basic. We just went there to, I guess, to be put in, you know. And then from there, I got on a truck and we went to a bus, actually, and we went to Fort Gordon. That's where I did basic.
Okay,
Fort Gordon, Georgia.
So did they bus you?
They bust us
Okay,
from
so that bus,
Jackson. Yeah,
you've got a bunch of guys on this bus
right.
that have no clue whatsoever what's going to happen today, tomorrow, or the next day.
Or the next day.
And the bus pulls up. Did they pull up in front of like a reception area?
Yeah, it was a reception area in Fort Jackson.
When
yeah.
they opened the doors and you guys got off, was there any DIs or was it just simply a couple of?
No, there was some drill sergeants there.
How did they react? How did they
Well,
interact with you guys?
well, if you remember, they rushed us off the bus. And the first thing they wanted us to do was in Fort Gordon in Georgia, the barracks were on pylons that were up off the ground about maybe 4 to 5 feet. Made us low crawl with our civvies on, low crawl underneath the barracks to pick out any debris, you know, cigarette butts, anything. And then we got on the other side, and we had to get up, and that was my first experience of the Army life.
And wasn't it funny when the DI looked at all you guys and said, do a formation?
Oh yeah,
And everybody's
nobody had any clue what to do. It was funny.
Yeah.
It was kind of funny. But I did my 8 weeks in Fort Gordon.
What did they teach you?
Well, in basic training, you know, we learned with the M14, you know, and then with the M16. I didn't get the M16 until AIT. But anyway, you know, a lot of drilling, bivouacs, you know, just learning the code
First
of
aid.
honor. Yeah,
Paul, you mentioned a bivouac. What is a bivouac?
just taking the guys out to an area where we set up tents, and then from there we did some instructional stuff that went on during the basic training period. We had, you know, sight. We did like not a starlight scope, but to coordinate the sight using compass and so
Oh
forth.
yeah, that was navigation.
Navigational,
Yep.
right? And
They did it in the day, and then that night.
then that
they
nighttime we
did
went out.
Night
Yep.
navigation.
Night
Yep.
navigation, yeah. So it was an experience. made some friends, you know, but none of us knew what was going to happen after basic training.
Okay, and do you know what I'm about, do you know every time what I'm gonna ask next?
No.
Because every time you end, that was what I was gonna ask. So, you've gone, let's say, 6 weeks, and now the DIs are actually allowing you to feel like you might be half human.
Exactly.
Up to that point, you were nothing.
Nothing.
And so, was there any rumors going around about where the guys might go from here? Or was it just clueless at this point?
No, we kind of had a feel, you know, depending on where we were going to sign for AIT. A lot of guys knew that probably the end result was going to be Vietnam. Some guys did go to Korea, South Korea. Some guys went to Germany, all right? But the majority of the company that I was in basic training moved on to AIT, and about 90% of the guys that I was with in AIT wound up going to Vietnam.
Let's talk about AIT. Did you stay right there at Gordon? Or
No, we got on a bus again, and we went back to Fort Jackson, and that's where I did my AIT in
Okay.
Fort Jackson, South
And
Carolina.
of course, now you're 11 Bravo.
11B,
Everybody on that bus is the same.
the same way.
And tell me a little bit about, it was a lot different walking into AIT, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
I mean, you didn't have to low crawl under the barracks.
No.
And they actually treated you somewhat respectful and so forth.
Exactly. We had some, I guess they were NCOs, but they were junior NCOs that we went through training in basic and then also through AIT. And they were with us during AIT. But that's where I was introduced to the M16, and we did a lot more, you know, rigorous training during AIT.
How often did you run in basic?
A lot. I remember the final PT test.
Yep.
When I first did the mile, I was like 8 minutes. When I did the mile at the end of basic training, I did it under five minutes.
That's
it was
great. Yeah, that's great.
4:50, 4:55, which was good, you know, because you had combat boots on and so forth. But did a lot of running in
Yeah.
basic and even in AIT.
Would you say that when you got drafted, what kind of shape were you in physically?
I was thin, but I wasn't physically, you know, strong yet.
What did you weigh?
When I went into the service, I weighed about 148,
Okay.
148 pounds.
At the end of AIT? What was your physical shape and how much did you weigh?
I probably weighed about 145, and I was in good shape.
Yeah. You hardened up really good.
Hardened up good.
Okay. What date did you get into Vietnam?
It was around June 16th of 1968.
Okay.
I finished AIT, came home on a leave for about 20 days, and then I had to report back to go overseas.
Was it kind of an emotional thing when you had to say goodbye?
Yes, it was.
And,
I remember that day. We flew out of John F. Kennedy Airport in Queens, and I went to Fort Ord in California, and then from Fort Ord we shipped, I guess, from what's that Air Force Base? I guess, is that Andrews Air Force Base in California, or is it McGuire? Not McGuire. I thought it was Andrews.
Tonsanute?
No, from California to go to Vietnam.
Oakland. We left out of Oakland.
Okay,
Yeah.
so Fort Ord, I guess it was, out of Oakland. And, you know, we flew, I think we stopped in Guam, and then from Guam, we flew directly into Tonsanute. And I got off the plane in Tonsanute. Now, this was a commercial airline, United.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we had our khakis, you know, on, no weapon yet, no, you know, jungle fatigues or anything like that. So then I think we took a little shuttle flight to
I'm going to
Benoit.
back you up just a minute.
Okay,
The plane lands, they taxi to wherever,
right,
they open the door,
right.
and Paul Naso goes down and he steps his first
Foot
step into Vietnam.
in Vietnam.
What was your impression of Vietnam?
Hot, It was a distinct smell in the air, okay? It was kind of eerie. It was an eerie feeling. Here I am now in Vietnam. I still don't know a lot of people, all right? I maybe had some small talk on the plane
Sure,
going over,
yeah.
but other than that, I knew absolutely nobody.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't even know where we were going.
Yeah,
If we were-
of course.
Nobody knew what outfit they're going to
Yeah.
wind up with.
All you knew is you were going to go to a personnel center in Long Ben, and
Right.
they were going
We're
to
in
tell you.
Benoit,
They were,
actually in Benoit. We went
They
in
were going to
Benoit.
tell you
yeah,
what, tell
exactly.
you what you're going to do.
Right.
Do you remember the actual plane flight? The flight over, like, do you remember the stewardesses? Do you remember, like, how they treated you? What
Oh,
they
yeah,
fed
they
you?
were-
What did they feed you on that flight?
Just normal stuff, normal airplane food. But everybody was very, very nice to us. We were all in our khakis, summer khakis. And, yeah, they treated us pretty good on the airlines.
Okay. And do you remember at the, I'll call it the reception station or the personnel station there, do you remember sitting in bleachers to hear?
Right.
Okay, how many days were you actually hanging around there before they called your name?
2 days.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, and it was funny. On the second day, they finally got up to like I's and N's and people's last name. So I'm sitting there in the bleachers, and all of a sudden I hear this name being called out, Izarino. I says, wait a minute. I says, my cousin's name is Izarino. Philip.
Sure.
And I'm trying to look down towards the other side of the bleachers where he was sitting. He got up, and I saw him, and I says, wow. I says, and he was told 25th Infantry Division.
Did you even know he'd gone
No,
in?
no, I knew he was in the service.
Yeah, okay.
But I didn't know he went to Vietnam the same exact time I went. It was unbelievable. So, anyway, and then they called me, and he stood up when they called my name. And then at the end of it, we were both going to the 25th Infantry. We didn't know yet what company yet, but we were able to converse a little bit before we got shipped out to Cu Chi. And
You looked at him and said, "What are you doing
I-
here?"
I
And
couldn't
he
believe
looked
it.
at you
This
and
is
said,
my-
"What are you doing?"
I know, this is my first cousin. This is my mother's brother's son, my Uncle Paul. And here we are together in Vietnam, the two of us, So anyway, we finally found out we were going to Charlie Company. He was in the heavy weapons platoon. He was in the mortar platoon. And I was in the second platoon, obviously, as an infantryman.
When you guys took that truck ride from there to
Cu Chi.
Cu Chi, do you remember your feelings being out and now you're exposed and you didn't have any weapon?
No. They did give us fatigues, the jungle fatigues, which we were able to change into, but we still weren't administered any weapons or anything
Yeah.
like that.
And the drive to Cu Chi was dusty and
Oh yeah, on a deuce and a half, and you heard guys talking, that have been there, I guess what was that, Route 9 or
Yeah, yeah.
Route 9 going into Cu Chi, and booby traps and ambushes and stuff like that. So you on the edge,
Okay. And all the guys in your truck, were they going to go to Charlie Company?
No,
Okay, so then they stopped in front of Charlie Company and said, "Hey, you guys
You
bail
get off."
Okay, you're off.
right.
Who greeted you, or what did you do from there?
Dave Teach Kelly.
Okay, and
All right. He
and-
was the company clerk at that time. He greeted us, and he took us to the barracks in Cu Chi. He says the company's out on, they were out,
Mhm.
and they were waiting for them to come in, Charlie Company, and but Teach did tell me you're assigned to the second platoon. He told my cousin Philip he was assigned to the heavy weapons platoon, the mortar platoon. And at that point, while we were in Cu Chi, I remember they put us out on the perimeter to watch that, the first night.
Guard duty.
Guard duty, basically, yes. And that's where I met Enrico Galli,
Right there.
right there,
Okay.
on guard duty. And I got to talking to him, and he told me he was from Staten Island. I told him I was from Queens. So, we bonded right away.
Sure.
And me and Ricky became very, very close the whole time I was in Vietnam. Anyway, so I remember that first night on guard duty, they had given us some flares. And every time Rick heard something, he had a flare off. Finally, somebody called down and said, "Who's that guy, blasting off those flares left and right?" So he kind of got reprimanded from one of the sergeants, but
Sure.
nothing bad, But that was the first night I met him, and then when we got into Cu Chi, when we left Cu Chi to go out with the rest of the Charlie Company.
And I'm gonna stop you there. When the few days you were in the back in Cu Chi, did you hear guys talking? Did you know anything about the Wolfhounds? Did you know
No.
anything about what the second platoon was even doing?
No. Dave Teach Kelly had talked to us a little bit and said that you guys are going to be assigned to the 2nd and the 27th Infantry. And then he said, Wolfhounds. I says, what do you mean, Wolfhounds? He says, yeah, that's the nickname of your company, is the Wolfhounds. So I says, oh, okay. And I really still didn't know much about
Sure.
the history of the Wolfhounds at that point in time. So.
And then you probably went on a resupply deuce and a half with the mail, and they took you out.
Took us out to a fire support base, and I believe it was the first one we went to was Crockett,
Yeah.
and then it was Jackson after that, and so
Mhm.
forth. But yeah, it was. I believe it was fire support Crockett, and that's where I met Sergeant Glover, Dick. I met Cal Johnson, Willie Williams, okay, yourself. Because we got in just about the
Exactly.
same time.
Yep.
So, you start to talk, and there was a couple other guys from New York that I became close with too. Steve Ciuccini and Eddie Fry. Okay, they were from the Bronx, and myself and Philip, my cousin Philip was from New
Sure.
York. I was from Queens. Philip was from Long Island. But we kind of like bonded.
Yeah.
Ricky was with us from Staten Island.
Yeah, well, the reason you did that is because you guys could understand what you were talking about.
Exactly.
Most everybody else couldn't, so
Exactly.
it was advantageous for you guys to be together.
Exactly, because we could understand each other. So I tell you just a quick story. They always ask Dick, "Why did you pick Naso to be your radio operator?" And Dick says, "You ever hear about the wind talkers during World War II, the Navajo Indians, that the Japanese could never understand what they were
Sure.
saying?" He said, "What you, as my radio operator, even if the gooks figured it out, they would never understand,
No.
the way you talk."
Of course not.
But that was, Dick always threw that up.
So Glover did approach you and say, "Hey, would you like to be my RTO," or how did that?
No, not right away.
Okay.
I was a rifleman in the beginning. I was in Cal Johnson's squad.
Mhm.
He was a squad leader, Cal, at that point. When I got there, I think Jamie O'Brien was our platoon leader. When I got in country, I think he was a platoon leader at that point.
Actually, not to correct you, but Jamie hadn't even arrived yet.
No, he wasn't there yet?
Cy Krevling was our platoon leader
Okay.
for,
About 6 weeks or so?
yeah.
Right.
So when we got there, Cy had just gotten there probably the day before we did.
Okay.
And so Cy was this little interim.
Right,
And,
because I remember Ricky Galli, he carried the radio for Cy.
That's correct.
Right.
Yep. And yesterday when we were talking to Cy, he brought that up. He said, Rick was his RTO and
His
so
radio
forth.
operator, yeah.
So, and of course, I don't know about you, but I thought Krevling was okay right from the beginning. I didn't know anything.
I had no-
I was
yeah.
a newbie, but it just seemed like he didn't act real rough or
Right.
tell everybody.
No, I remember him even talking to Dick, and he said, "Dick, listen, this is your platoon."
Yep.
He says, "I'm the platoon leader, but I'll do everything to support you and the guys. Whatever you need, come to me. He says, but when it comes to logistics and stuff like that, he says, you know, you got the experience, you take the platoon
Sure.
out and so forth. So, I always got along good with Cy. I thought he was a good officer. But,
Go ahead.
yeah, no, I was gonna say, then I guess Jamie came into the platoon and he
After
was,
him.
yeah, he was a real,
Yeah. So tell me how you got hooked up as Glover's RTO.
well, like I said, when I was a rifleman for a while in Cal Squad, and then I carried the M79 grenade launcher for a while, a couple of weeks maybe, and then one day I came back in. I guess we were out on a search and destroy, and Glover. Somebody told me Glover was looking for you, so I went to Sergeant Glover, and he said, "Listen, I need a radio operator." He said, "I want you to be my radio operator." I says, "Fine." I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but you be the radio operator. I says, "Fine." So I became his radio operator, and that lasted until I got hurt in February of
Right,
'69.
right. Okay, and so, do you remember the very first time we went on an ambush patrol?
Yeah, I think I do remember the first time we went out. Okay, and again, everybody's recollection is a little bit different than the interpretation is a little bit different
Sure.
than the next guy's. But I remember the one night we went on a sweep to a village, and it was at nighttime, and we had 2 tanks, and a couple of APCs in between, and we were walking alongside the APCs and next to the tanks, and went through this village, and I don't ask me the name of the village or whatever, but I remember Ricky and Dick got a big kick out of it. Even the guys on the tanks were laughing. They had this big spotlight, and it was shining it from side to side of the village as we're going down the road. And at one point, they shined the light directly on me and Rick. And whatever the reason was, I just kind of like broke out into a soft shoe with this big spotlight on me, And Dick said, if the VC didn't kill you that night, they weren't going to get you for a while, So, but that's a funny story. So, Rick used to talk about it all the time when he was alive. So, but anyway, I remember us being on an ambush patrol when the howitzer, the 90 millimeter howitzer, was that what it was? When they went to fire it to ambush the VC, it just went click, and the round never came out.
Yep, it was a misfire.
A misfire, and that was a little bit scary that night. And I remember all the ambush patrols as well.
Let me ask you this, on that particular night, was there a gunfight that night?
I believe we finally opened up, with the small arms fire, even though the 90 didn't work. And then the first thing Dick wanted to do was get us out of that area as quickly as possible.
Yep.
And relocate to a different spot.
Sure.
And that's kind of like what we did. I don't know if there was a body count the next morning, if they found any dead VC, but
Did you have any bullets go by you?
John, when you're there and you're in a firefight, you don't realize what's happening around you. I'm sure there was bullets flying.
I was just wondering if you heard for the first time in your life what it sounds like when bullets go whizzing over your head.
Yeah,
'Cause
you
it's
could say that.
It's
Yeah,
a distinct thing.
absolutely, especially from an AK.
So would that have been your first firefight then, or interaction where you actually shot on purpose?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Probably, yeah. When I was with Cal's squad, I think we encountered, during the daytime sweep, we encountered some sniper fire, and it was coming out of a hedgerow over in we tried to, move up into the hedgerow to see what, take out the VC, but by the time we got up there, they were gone already. Yeah, that was probably the first time I was really under fire,
Mm-hmm.
And that was probably around, I got there in June. This is real quick. It was maybe beginning of July
Mm-hmm.
that we got in our first big firefight. And then I was wounded twice. I got 2 Purple Hearts. I got wounded on September 5th, which was ironic because it was my dad's birthday. And he was real sick at home. I was getting, letters from my mom.
Sure.
But anyway, that was the first time. And that was, we were coming up on a hedgerow. When we used to walk point with Dick, he'd always have, like, Willie would be the point person, and then always be another guy and a radio operator that communicated back
Right.
to Ricky's,
Right.
Either to the lieutenant or to Dick, So the three was up there, and I think a grenade came out of the hedgerow, and we all hit the ground, and I caught a piece of shrapnel in my left arm from the grenade. And that, like I said, that was September 5th.
Okay. And tell us what a typical, remember we used to do a lot of day riffs.
Right.
What was a typical day like with us out in the countryside?
Well, we were told where to go, okay? A lot of times, we were in areas that were heavily involved with VC and so forth. Not so much NVA yet, but VC, a lot of VC. In villages, hamlets like that, we'd sweep through a village or a hamlet during the daytime. I remember when we got ambushed at, I guess it was Dodge City, when Mike Wunderlich was killed.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that day there, I was next to Smokes, Dave. I can't even say his last name, but Smokes, we'll call him Smokes.
Similar.
Shimla, okay.
Dave.
And I remember being next to him, and he was only a few yards away from Mike Wunderlich when he was killed. He was there as I believe, a forward observer assigned to us at that time. Yeah, but it was, you're always worried about booby traps, mostly, when you were going through daytime sweeps and search and destroy missions. Always worried about booby traps. I think that was our biggest fear, somebody triggering a booby trap. But
Let's go back to Dodge City for just a second.
okay,
Because I remember we were sweeping through, we had stopped to open a can of peaches because I think they were going to try to figure out which direction we were going to go from there.
right,
And there was a big open field in front of us, a peanut field.
okay.
And when they ambushed us, did you know that Mike Wunderlich had been hit?
No, not at first. No,
Oh,
it wasn't until, I saw some guys, gathering around him when he was on the ground, that I realized he was shot.
What was your feeling?
Oh, it was terrible. We never liked seeing anybody get hurt, all right, whether it be a booby trap or, during a firefight or whatever. But it was not a good feeling. It was, I didn't know if he was dead yet until they finally they sent in a medevac and they put him in a body bag and they sent him back.
Mm-hmm. And I think for me that day, that was the first time that the total reality of how dangerous it was and how vulnerable I was.
Right.
Because you could have been standing where Mike was, Krevling was to his right, and I was right next to Krevling.
Could have been any one of
And-
us.
I mean, it could have been any of us up there.
That's right.
And so, did you kind of feel that too? Was it like a reality check, and all of a sudden, wow, this is like real?
Yep. After being there a couple of weeks, the feeling of being afraid kind of like went to the background, and we just said, you know what, we're here, we got to survive, we got to do the best we can, and so you stop thinking about dying.
Oh, yeah.
At least I did,
Yeah.
anyway. I stopped thining about dying.
It
I
was
said,
surviving.
it was surviving at that point, and if, God forbid something did happen, it happened, But I was always concerned about the guys that I served with, yourself and Ricky and my cousin Philip and guys from the Bronx and, the close-knit guys, Tommy Kemp, Willie
Sure.
Williams,
Oh, yeah.
Cal Johnson,
Big Joe.
Big Joe Wascom, yeah, Big Joe.
And we always worried about Sheila.
Yep.
No, we didn't want
We
anything
didn't
to
want
happen.
we didn't want the monkey to get killed or anything like that. But yeah, that was Joe was very attached to that monkey.
Okay. You were involved, we all were, but I mean specifically, you were involved in a action that ended up with you winning an award for valor.
Yes.
Can you start and tell us what the day started out like, where you went, and just tell us that story.
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I believe we were at one of the fire support bases. It could have been Jackson. It could have been up by Trang Bang. I'm not 100% sure. But company commander got a call. This was Captain Eichner at the time. There was a LRP team, a long-range recon patrol team that was pinned down by enemies, fire. And there was 6 of them. And they had taken a couple of casualties, okay? And we were called in to go in as a reactionary force to try to get to these guys and get them out of the kill zone. As it turned out, they were in the middle of a VC complex,
Probably a company-size
complex
area, yeah.
with bunkers and machine gun fires and everything. So as we were approaching the kill zone to try to reach out to these guys and get them out of there, I was the radio operator for Captain Eichner, the CO, and we tried getting as close as we could to those guys, and finally we were able to communicate with them because they did have a radio.
Okay.
And we were able to communicate with them. But during that process of getting them out of there, we took a hell of a lot of fire. And in fact, Captain Eichner exposed himself. I exposed myself. I had the M16 with the radio, and I was firing like heck to try to get these guys, or at least security areas, so we can get these guys out of there. And that's eventually what happened. We were able to secure the area, and we were able to get those guys out of there. 3 were wounded, and 3 guys were able to get back to us. So they put me in for the the Bronze Star, but they knocked it down to the Army Commendation Medal for Valor, and I have a write-up at home, and the Army Commendation Medal with the V device on it at home.
That's on our website.
Yeah,
I
believe
put
it
that
is.
on your page,
Yes,
so
yes.
anybody that's interested in reading
What
about that, they
happened,
can just go
right.
to your page on the website.
Right.
Okay, so I'm assuming the adrenaline hit pretty hard that night.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and you were, you were in a gunfight. This wasn't just
No.
sitting behind a berm.
No, this was in...
This was a real gunfight.
Right.
Now, there's another incident that
Right.
we were involved with where we were a blocking force.
for the 101st.
Okay, would you mind telling us about that?
Dick actually told a good bit about it in his interview. But we went in as a blocking force for the 101st Airborne Division. There was a village that was surrounded by U.S. Soldiers. The 101st on one side, 25th, us guys, Charlie Company on another side. And not known to us, they were dropping leaflets all night long for the VC to either surrender or be prepared to get killed the next morning, okay? So I was with Dick and Willie Williams, and we kind of went from where the 101st was, we kind of went all the way around to the far end of the perimeter of soldiers, and Dick, Willie, and myself, we dug in behind a small berm, and we're watching the village. And what happened was is that we had set up, I think, 2 or 3 claymore mines in front of our position. What happened was is that the VC had come out of the village, but in front of the VC were women and children.
They were pushing them.
They were pushing them in front. So they had an escape route to get out of the village, but which we didn't know what was really going on. So as it turned out, Dick didn't want to fire the claymore mines because there was women and children
Sure,
in front of the VC.
sure.
So anyway, finally the VC broke loose from the women and children, and they were coming directly at us, me, Willie, and Dick Glover. So I hear, I'm down below. I got my rifle over the berm, but
Was there any illumination going at that point?
I believe there was, and you could see the VC coming.
That's
And
that's what I mean.
they were coming right at us, okay? And I hear Dick tell Willie, he said, Dick, Willie, I think this is maybe our last goodbyes here. He was scared, Dick. And I never saw Glover that afraid. But there was not much we could do. And they were no more than 25 yards in front of us.
Did you guys did you touch off the claymores?
No, even at that point we didn't, because there were still women and children, around in that
Yeah.
area. But they were about 25 yards away from us, and they broke off, as they're coming towards us, they broke off to their right at the last minute, and they overran 2 positions that the 101st were at, and they killed those soldiers. To this day, Dick, even when I talked to Dick about it, he has no idea why they broke off and went that way. Because they looked like they were coming right towards us.
Sure.
And they were going to overrun us, and then at the last minute, like I said, they went to the right. And it's kind of scary that night.
Dick said that just before the end, he told Willie to lay down
Right.
and you to lay on Willie, and then he was
Going to lay on me while they came right over us, But
talk about caring and taking leadership. Wasn't Glover just a one of a kind?
One of a
I mean,
kind.
and I've said this until people are tired of me saying it. If it wasn't for Dick Glover, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah,
I mean,
obviously, I think a lot of us felt that way,
You
okay?
know.
Not just, you, myself, other guys that Dick had an impact on
Yeah.
while we served with him in Vietnam, so.
I can't remember. Were you there the night that Captain Eichner? It was after that incident,
Okay.
after the 101st incident.
Right.
A couple of days later, Eichner wanted to send our platoon into the village and set up a night ambush in the middle of the
Right.
village. You were there, weren't you?
Yes.
And remember how Dick would get us in a huddle before we'd ever leave the wire, just to
Right.
make sure
Everybody
his
knew,
instructions,
right.
what we're doing? And I'll never forget it as long as I live, because he told us, he says, our mission is to go right into the middle of town and set up an ambush. But he says, we're not going to do that.
No.
And he said, what we are going to do is we're going to go in where supposedly we're supposed to, and we're going to go in a little ways, and we're just going to hold up. And he says, I know a place in there where we can set up next to a little tiny, not even a canal, maybe an irrigation ditch or something. And he said, I'm going to place you guys, every one of you, where I want you. And he said, I don't want anybody talking,
Right.
no noise, no
I remember
coughing,
that. Yeah, I
no
remember.
laughing,
Yep.
and nobody shoots. And I thought to myself at that moment, he said, I don't want anybody shooting no matter what. He says, the only thing I want you to do is if one of them walks on you, you take them out with your knife.
Right.
And I'm going, wait a minute. He's assuming we're going to see
Make contact with the enemy.
NVA.
Yeah.
And so, but and you know afterwards, that was a suicide mission. If
Oh,
we would have
absolutely.
went
Where they wanted
where
us to.
Eichner wanted us to
Right.
go, it would have been a suicide mission. And then that night, nobody went to sleep. I mean, there was no passing of the watch.
Right.
And then about halfway through the night, you could smell marijuana and you could hear laughing.
Yeah,
And do you remember them, about 50 of them walked
right by us.
right by us.
Yep.
And I don't know about you, but man, I was tight. I mean,
Yeah.
my neck, I think, was, I think my neck was almost a Charlie horse. And I never forget, because when they went by us, I thought, oh my God, thank God we didn't,
Right.
have to get involved. Because 50, I think there was probably about 15 of us out that night, maybe 18. It would have been a massacre.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I remember when I was carrying the radio for Dick that night, the handset had that,
the squawk.
and I didn't want, you're trying to make sure.
Muffle it?
Muffle it as much as you could. But yeah, I do remember that night. That's one that I kind of like forgot.
Mm-hmm.
Went to the back burner, but now that you're bringing it up, yes, I remember that night.
And then before daylight, Dick got us up.
Right.
And he took us right to where we came in, the village.
Right, right.
And we waited until daylight, then we walked out.
Yeah, we walked
And I don't know if you were aware of it or not, but Eichner met us halfway to the wire.
Right.
And he was screaming at Dick.
Right.
Why did you not make contact?
Yeah. And he
And
says,
Dick
I
says,
don't know.
didn't see anything.
Yeah. We were where we were
Just
supposed to be.
straight face.
Right. Oh, yeah. No, Dick was good like that.
And, but anyway, I just thought that, you know what, that was a close call.
That was.
You know.
That night was a close call.
And do you remember when we used to go into the Iron Triangle?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, every time we went on any type of operation in the Iron Triangle, we were always really worried about what was out there in front of us. So I remember one operation where I think we were at a soccer field, or it could have been even it could have been like a cemetery. I'm not exactly sure, but I remember there were some APCs there. We were camped underneath the APCs, and we were expecting some sort of activity or contact that night, but it never happened, which obviously I was glad. But Iron Triangle was a nasty place to be.
And little did we know that during years in my tour, between the Hobo Woods and the Iron Triangle, you and I picked up enough Agent Orange
Oh,
to cause us
a lot of issues.
nothing but trouble.
Right.
It's just amazing. Now, Ray Bourgeois,
Right.
okay? Ray called me just the day before we came on this trip.
Okay.
Ray was one of the guys that actually went 12 months without ever getting wounded.
Right.
And at about the 8th month, he started to get so frustrated that he would try to get a wound. He'd put his hand up in the middle of a firefight. Well, I mean, guys are leaving, guys are getting wounded, $1 million wounds, right? And so forth. And so, but he didn't, and he was an angry person because of it. But he called me and he said, we spent 12 months in Vietnam and they were trying to kill us every single day. And he says, I come home and wouldn't you know it, Agent Orange is going to get the job done.
Yep.
He's got prostate cancer.
He's got prostate.
And so he was Tim's godfather.
Okay.
So very close to me.
Right, no,
very close to me. And I just couldn't believe it. I mean, we don't think about that. I mean, as far as I was concerned, Ray was probably as healthy as, he smoked.
Right.
But, and interestingly enough, he said, I would have never thought I'd have got prostate cancer. I'd have thought I'd have died of lung cancer.
Yeah.
Because of all the smoking.
Right.
But
Exactly.
we didn't know. The
No.
Agent Orange thing was not even mentioned.
No, I found out when I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes that it was Agent Orange related. And, I went through the VA and I got a claim put in for that. And now with this leukemia that I was diagnosed almost 2 years ago, same thing now. They're doing a lot of research. In fact, Donna and I are going to go see a doctor up in Boston, Massachusetts, in regard to MDS is what I have, myelodysplastic syndrome, and the relationship with Agent Orange. So they're trying to get it on a presumptive list. Okay, it's not there yet.
Yep.
So we'll see what happens. But you know, it's been a tough go these last 2 years for myself personally. But I'm just trying to live my life the best way I know how. You know?
And you know, amazingly, just since we all found each other and we're all back together again, the majority of us have something
Exactly.
Agent Orange related.
Absolutely.
I mean, if there's any doubt in anybody's mind whether or not Agent Orange had an effect on our lives, man, it's devastating.
Absolutely.
You know, devastating.
I was gonna ask, when you were talking about going out at night and the watch, in a lot of the interviews, they talk about passing the watch.
On guard.
Did you ever, you were the radio guy a lot, but did you ever fall asleep on watch? Did you have to take a watch?
Not
or-
when I was on watch. I mean, you know, Dick would say, you know, give me the handset. He says, try to, you know, close your eyes if you can.
Close
You know?
close your eyes.
And that's basically all you did was close your eyes. I mean, I never fell into a deep sleep or anything like that.
Did you ever know of any guys, did you ever know of guys that on their turn because Dick, you know, we were talking to Dick and he said that, he mentioned if a guy fell asleep, he said, I'll cut you. He said he'd cut him on there. Did you ever know any guys that fell asleep?
Yeah, a couple of guys once in a while, but you know, we'd catch them in time. You know, somebody else, you know, the guy who was next to him maybe would wake up or open his eyes and see that the other guy was sleeping, and they, you know,
There was one guy in particular that did get blood drawn, and that
Did he
was
really?
Larry Lemire.
Was it Larry?
And
Okay.
so, of course, that's horrifying. I mean, that put the fear of God in me.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if Glover's actually going to go cut somebody's throat, I don't want it to be mine. And later, you know, when I found Larry Lemire like 10 years ago, he brought it up. I didn't even ask the question. He goes, yeah. He says, you know, when we were out on this
Right.
this ambush, he says, he said, apparently, I must have went to sleep. And the next thing I know, my head's tilted back and I feel something on my neck. And I woke up and it was Glover. And he says, you know what's amazing about that? He says, I didn't go to sleep. He goes, when I got home, I found out I had a condition that was, it was like your eyes could be open and you were not
Nowhere.
there,
Yeah,
not there or
not
whatever.
there.
And he said the name of it. And he said, so here, he didn't know,
Right.
but he said, here I'm thinking to myself, man, I'm going to sleep on guard and I don't want to, you know, and
Right.
all that. And here he had a condition.
A condition.
And another one, Freddie Hanna, was another one that made sure all of us new guys knew the importance of staying awake on guard.
Yeah.
And he made it very clear that if any of us did go to sleep on guard, he would deal with us in a very, very severe way.
Absolutely.
So, now, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, most of the times, like I said, I was always awake. You know, for me, even close my eyes was a tough thing to do, especially when we were out on ambush patrols. And, but you know, I wait until we get back into the base camp and the fire support base, and then I just crash in my bunker.
Sure.
You know, get a couple hours sleep then.
Sure.
Yeah.
I recall, now that you mention you crashing in your bunker, I remember that a lot of times when we'd come in from ambush patrol, you had a care package waiting for you. And when you crashed in your bunker and you opened up that care package, the smell coming from your bunker was smelled like Italian sausages and
Oh, yeah.
pepperonis and,
Yeah.
and Goomba, whatever.
My
And all the guys would flock
I know.
like dogs.
they came right to the bunker.
Going to
And it wasn't only me. Rick used to get
Yeah.
some big packages too.
Yeah.
Rick and Enrico Galli, but I'd get them from my mom and my ex-wife. They would send me packages whenever they could. You know, dried sausage, sharp provolone cheese, Ritz crackers, whatever they could ship that wasn't going to go bad. Funny story was Rick's dad sent him a pizza.
Oh, I remember that.
Got there 3 weeks after
I do remember
he shipped it
that.
out. It was all molded and everything.
Of course.
And Rick said, I can't eat this. He put it on top of the bunker, and the guys came over and they were scraping the mold off.
Of course.
And eat the crust, It was crazy.
Sure.
But
I've
a true story.
I've always teased you about that.
Right.
But in reality, Naso would say, if you'll sit like a dog and bark, I will give you a piece of this pepperoni. And it was embarrassing, you guys, to watch us crawl on our hands and knees.
Oh, I don't know if it was that
up
bad.
to his bunker.
I don't know if it was that bad. Dick loved it
Oh, yeah.
because
Oh,
he was a platoon sergeant, and we stayed in the same bunker with him.
Sure.
He used to get all the food. So
Oh, yeah. And here I'm receiving a package from my mother, and my favorite was chocolate chip cookies. But by the time they got to the field, when you would open it up, the cookies had returned to their original ingredients. It was just, but we ate every spoonful.
Oh,
of it.
absolutely.
That was that.
absolutely. No, thank God for care packages. Let's put it that way.
And mail.
And mail.
Mail was great.
Mail was great.
Tell us a little bit about what it was like when we started doing eagle flights, which was early. We weren't out there a couple of days before we made our first eagle flight.
Absolutely. Scary. I was not a good flyer. Even on commercial airlines, I used to get sick all the time on commercial airlines. But helicopters never bothered me. Don't know why. Maybe because the doors weren't there. And, when we flew over the treetop level and coming in at, whatever it was, 100 miles an hour or whatever, and then all of a sudden they would hover, and we'd have to get off the choppers. But I earned the air medal because of the amount of time we spent in the air with the helicopters. Interesting. I was always worried about having one shot down.
Oh, yes.
While we were on it. So, knock on wood, thank God that never happened. But I did see on one Eagle flight, one helicopter did get shot down. Guys were okay. They were able to get out, the door gunners and the pilot. But it just kind of like went in and they kind of tilted over. Yeah, it was interesting. Let's
Yeah.
put it that way, flying on helicopters.
And when we were out there lined up, ready to be picked up, Glover already told us what he thought to expect. Remember? And he'd say, it looks like it's going to be okay, but if he said, it's a hot LZ.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember what it felt like?
Oh yeah,
I mean,
I tensed up. I got my rifle ready. I didn't even know half the times if the helicopters were actually going to come in and land and let us off, or come in at about 8 to 10 feet
That's
above
right.
the ground, and then you had to jump off.
Yeah. The door gunner would say, bail.
Yeah,
get,"
go. Right.
Did you ever get injured, your back, your legs, your ankles, any of that when you'd have to take a 10-foot drop like that?
No, not then. I used to have some back issues when I carried the M79 with all the ammo.
Oh, yeah.
With the rucksack.
Yes.
The bar used to go right into my back, and I used to complain that my back was hurting sometimes. But no, not when we bailed out of the helicopters, Timmy. Most of the times we were able to land, which is a good thing, or hover a couple of feet off
Yeah,
the
yeah.
ground and then just jump out and set up your position. But
I remember my first Eagle flight, right at Crockett, it was monsoon.
Right.
Rice paddies were all
full.
And they took us out on these berms. And they lined us up on the berms, and the helicopters came down and hovered, and we had to
jump on
when they were hovering. And I thought, is this the way it is? This I didn't think that was the way it was supposed to be done. But they did what they had. They did what they had to do.
None of this was ever taught to us during
No,
basic or AIT.
nothing. Not even talked.
It was a whole brand new world when we got to
not
Vietnam.
even talked about. Yeah.
Right.
What do you remember about Doc Turner?
Yeah, Doc was one of our better medics. Let's put it that way. A little on the crazy side, but he would, he would expose himself, and he'd go out and he'd do whatever he had to do to get to a wounded soldier or make sure that the guys are okay. And he carried a weapon. Some medics didn't carry weapons. He
Yeah.
carried a weapon, and but as soon as you yelled "Doc," he would go.
Yep.
I remember Dick was saying a few times he used to get upset with Doc Turner because he was exposing himself too much. But one of the best medics I served with.
Yep, I agree 100%. Do you remember when we were back at a fire support base, he had a guitar?
Oh yeah, he
What do
loved
you
to play.
What do you remember about that?
He used to play the guitar, and he used to always tell us that he used to know the box tops, and he would play guitar and he'd play the music of the box tops. So that was a group in the '60s, I guess. And he was a character, Doc.
Yep. And nobody,
I loved him to death.
Nobody believed him. I mean,
No.
box top, yeah, right. Later, when I came home and then I found Doc, it was the neighbor kids. That was who they all started out when they were young kids.
Young kids
and
in
they
the
used to
neighborhood.
they used to go on top of Doc's flat roof garage, and they were up there and they just started picking and playing
And stuff.
And Doc was with them the whole time
Right.
until he got drafted. And they always said he was, the fifth box top or something.
Right,
That's what
right.
the group called him.
Right.
But the drafting thing, that took him out of the music business
right.
in a quick hurry. But, the fishing trips,
Great.
the
lot of fun.
bonfires,
Yep. Just sitting around.
Doc sitting, playing.
Playing
I
and-
mean, was that surreal?
No, it was.
And, of course, he always let out with the letter.
Right.
And
That was his favorite
that
song.
was his favorite song. So, did you have an opportunity to take an R&R?
Yes, I did.
Where did you go?
I went to Hawaii, all right? And the reason why I went to Hawaii, because normally, if you weren't an officer, you weren't married, or you had a family, getting to Hawaii was a tough nut.
Well, they
to
reserved
crack.
it for those people.
Exactly.
Especially the married guys.
Right. But what happened in my case was, and it happened at the very last minute, my ex-wife got permission from my parents to go to Hawaii with her girlfriend. Originally, my mother was going to go, but my dad was too sick
Yeah,
for my mother
yeah.
to leave. So, and I didn't even know if I was able to go to Hawaii at that point in time. So what happened was one of the second lieutenants or one of the captains or whoever bailed out at the last minute. There was an opening. Dick grabbed me. He says, "Go! I want you to go up to Eichner." I believe it was Eichner at that time, because it was December, the week before Christmas of '68. Okay, and they asked me if I wanted to go. So I had to get a Western Union telegram
Oh, yeah.
out to my folks to let them know that I was still going to Hawaii, but I didn't know if they were going to be there. It was one of those situations. So as it turned out, my ex-wife and her girlfriend met me at Fort DeRussy. That's where we checked in Hawaii, and I had a week in Hawaii,
Okay.
which was nice. The worst part of that was getting back on a plane to go back to
I
Vietnam.
was just gonna say that. It was not good. When you got on R&R for a few days, there was an actual lifting of
Right,
every
exactly.
scary, nightmarish thing. But then the reality set in
that you're going back.
that I gotta go back.
Right.
And did you feel like I don't wanna go back?
No, yeah, of course.
You know.
But I didn't want to fool around with the government at that point in
Yep.
time.
Well, and I went on R&R to Hong Kong right after Diamond,
Right.
and we were all busted up.
I know.
mean, we were just
Yep.
mentally, we were not in a good place, and so I was over there,
Right.
and I was 7 day, And at the end of 7 days, I said, I'm not going back.
That's it.
I did. I just said, I'm not going back. And the funny part about that was, I stayed another 6 days, always thinking, well, where was I gonna go? I had a one-way ticket back to Vietnam.
No.
I ran out of money. What do you?
What do you do?
And
Right?
so finally I said, well, I'm gonna have to go back and face the music.
Right.
Because I knew, I mean, we all knew, if you were AWOL, that was court-martial and you were
Right.
probably going to long band.
Right.
But I steeled myself, got back on the plane and came back to Vietnam. And I was very sad. Not only was I scared because I didn't want to go back, but I was sad because I knew my whole career was ruined.
Right.
So as I was walking up to the Quonset hut, the company clerk, Gary Hunt, come out. And he saw me coming, and he looked at me, and he started cussing. He called me everything but out. And I said, what's wrong? And he says, do you realize that you could have cost me my job? And I go, what? And he goes, I put your name back on the morning report the day you were supposed to be back.
Oh, boy.
And he carried me on the morning report every day.
Every
So
day.
as far as the bookwork was, Quintrell was back on the day
Right.
so I was eternally grateful for that. But you know what that really showed? Those guys took care of us.
No, they did.
Most of those guys were
they
really
were good.
They were watching our backs
Yes.
on a lot of that
Yes.
stuff. But yeah, I remember that feeling. You know, I just don't want to go back. And how many months did you serve with the Wolfhounds?
I was with them for just a little under 9 months, 8 months, 20-some-odd days before I got hurt at Diamond.
And
in
the date was?
February 23rd,
Okay.
1969.
And I know this is a rough part of it. Can you give us a little bit of a feeling for what was happening the day before the night of the
Right.
23rd?
Dick had gotten me off the line platoon, okay, the second platoon, and I became the company commander radio operator. And at this point, it was Eichner. So that day, we were hearing a lot of different reports, okay? Dick was assigned to battalion at that point, okay? But his bunker was like right next to where I was with the company commander bunker. So,
But Dick's job became logistical, coordinating artillery, right?
Right.
I mean, he was the guy that
He was
was
the
in
main
charge
guy.
of all
right,
the weaponry.
exactly. And that was really relegated to the battalion XO, but he was useless. So Dick kind of like just took charge of everything. you know?
Sure.
And thank God for that.
Oh, yeah, and I'm glad that's where he was. I
Right,
mean,
so,
if he saw something, he'd just do it.
Right. So, so like I said, we were hearing different reports about the NVA massing up by the Cambodian border, and we were right in their path, you know, and I think we were put out there specifically to be in their path, using us as, as guinea pigs. But the day went along. I remember Rick was out in the field with me still, galley, and he was going on R&R, okay? My cousin Philip was in the heavy weapons platoon, was coming back from R&R,
Oh.
okay? So neither one of them, Rick, Dick finally kicked Rick in the butt and told him to get on the next chopper back to Cu Chi, which was about 5 o'clock in the evening, and he left. Rick went. So I'm still there. Dick is still there, obviously. And my cousin Philip is back in Cu Chi waiting to come back out to the
Waiting
field.
for a chopper.
Right, to come back out. So, needless to say, I guess it started about midnight of the 22nd, I guess it would have
Yeah.
been. They started watering us, and we kind of all took cover. The second platoon was out on that ambush patrol, and I think Dick communicated with you guys to make sure you just stay down.
Don't shoot.
Don't engage, because you don't want to know how many out there
Yeah.
there was. And he could
You
tell.
could see him from
He
the
could
cruise
see them.
surf starlight scope.
And from the tower, he could see how many were out there.
Yeah.
And he said he just told you guys to more or less stay down. Now, there was a few guys who stayed behind that night, and they were manning the bunkers on our side of the perimeter. Sugar Bear Taylor, I think, was one, and maybe a couple other guys that didn't go out on the ambush patrol. To this day, even Dick doesn't really understand exactly how it happened, but apparently the NVA cut through the wire, and they kind of took out those couple of bunkers that were up on that one side of the perimeter.
Even more amazing than that, they disconnected all the
Claymore mines.
and the phosphorus flares, the trip flares.
Right.
They disconnected them.
Everything.
Nobody saw.
Nothing, which is amazing to me. But anyway, so all hell broke loose at that point in time, okay? And,
What's going on with the radio? You're on the radio right now.
well, not really. The CEO was there. Eichner was there, and I guess they were trying to communicate, or Dick was trying to communicate with you guys. When we started getting mortared, I grabbed the radio, I took it into the bunker with me, but now I'm in a defensive
Okay.
position, firing my rifle.
Okay.
Okay. Once they started the ground attack on that side of the perimeter, and it was a North Vietnamese regular who crawled up to the bunk I was in, and they threw. I thought it was an RPG for 40 some odd years, but it was a satchel charge.
Sure.
And it took out the entire bunker, okay? And there was maybe 5 of us in the bunker. And I didn't know about John Kavanaugh, but I knew myself, and there was a Kit Carson scout that survived that explosion, okay? There were some other guys in the bunker. I don't know whatever happened to those guys, okay? They
Well,
couldn't-
Kavanaugh, Glover pulled him out.
Pulled him
Because when
out.
I found Kavanaugh, you know what the first thing he said to me was? Have you found Dick Glover?
Right.
And I said, yeah, why? Because he saved my life. I mean,
pulled him out.
literally, he
Right.
says, he saved my life.
Well, Dick did the same thing for me, but I didn't know it was Dick that was pulling me out, because I was kind of like dazed and
Do you know,
shocked.
do you know, theoretically speaking, you should have been blown to pieces.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, your guardian angel was working overtime that night because those same satchel charges is what were thrown into the 2nd platoon bunkers, and all of them were killed but Brogan, one.
One guy.
All of them were killed but Brogan. And you know why Brogan wasn't killed? Because when the bag came in, he ran to the corner and everybody ran up against him. So there was a wall of bodies
Right.
between him and the explosion.
And the explosion.
But yeah, theoretically, you should have never even.
Probably.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate. I think the fact that we were at the firing port in the front of the bunker, I saw the flash, okay, when the NVA soldier threw the satchel charge towards the bunker, and I kind of like ducked behind the wall, okay, me and this Kit Carson scout. And the other guys were behind me, Some of them were looking to try to crawl out, from the bunker, and they took the majority of the blast.
Okay.
I mean, I got hurt. Thank God it wasn't, super serious, but it was enough to get me back home. But
You know what Dick told me when he saw you? You were
dazed.
like,
Absolutely.
you were there, but you weren't there.
I was in shock.
And he said he handed you a pistol,
Right.
and he said, if any,
Thing moves,
shoot it.
shoot it. So they propped me up on an ammo box.
Exactly.
Gave me the 45, and the guys kept coming back and forth, and they said, anything moves out there, you shoot it, because there's a lot of
Oh, yeah,
a lot
yeah.
of NVA and VC still, alive. So here I am now. My face is out like this because I got a piece of shrapnel right below the jaw, right above the jawbone, right below the temple, and my face blew up like this. So I mean, it looked like I was disfigured. And I'm sitting there on this ammo box with my 45, and yeah, I don't know what's going on, really.
Yeah.
You know, I believe if it wasn't for Delta Company, because they were on the other side of the perimeter, they were able to withstand their attack from their side, and they came back over on Charlie
Right.
Company's side to stabilize the situation on that side. And but I laid in that bunker 5.5 hours before they pulled me out, because the bunker got taken out pretty quickly. And that's
Were you cognizant?
in and out.
And did you think at any time, this is it?
Yeah, a few times. I was groggy. I'm going in there out of consciousness because the explosion, when the explosion initially happened, it sucked the air out of that bunker,
Wow.
and I couldn't breathe. So at that point in time, I thought I was dying, okay, because I couldn't breathe anymore. And then finally, I was able to. They were dropping artillery rounds maybe 25 to 30 yards away from where the bunker was. Every time a round went off, the bunker, I came off the ground, you know? So,
And
and they
like-
dropped a lot of rounds that night.
And later, we found out that Dick Glover had called Broken Arrow,
Right,
which is, in the Army terminology, means he had pre-located within the
Right. Perimeter.
perimeter. If we got run over, that was our last resort.
Right.
And Broken Arrow was the last resort.
Right.
And he called in Broken Arrow, and that's when all these artillery rounds started.
I mean, they were coming in, and they were all over. And then the gunships came in, and then jets were firing napalm or whatever else they were firing. But in the meantime, I'm in the bunker. I don't even know what's going on above me. But I did hear in the beginning, once the attack started, I heard a lot of Vietnamese
Oh.
speaking above us. And I thought for sure they were either going to throw a grenade in, but
Sure.
I guess because the bunker had collapsed, and they just figured we were out of
Oh,
commission.
oh, yeah.
My rifle almost got snapped in half, my M16. But once they got me out of the bunker, that's when they gave me the 45. And I didn't know what I was going to do. You know, I had a couple of grenades. I didn't know what I was going to do. While I was laying in that bunker.
You were so concussed. I
Right.
mean, your brain was rattled around in there to the point, I'm
Absolutely.
surprised you had a thought. And so tell me about, do you remember when medevac came in? Do you remember when they finally
Yeah.
were able to?
Once they were able to stabilize the attack, more or less, they started bringing in medevacs, and they were taking out the serious wounded first. Okay, I was considered walking wounded, so I was like on the third medevac
Okay,
that left Diamond, and we went into Cucci. I went to the 12th Evac hospital, and then to the third field. What was it? The third field hospital in Cucci. From the evac, I went to the third field hospital, and then from there, they told me I was going to Japan, and I went to the 249 General
how
Hospital.
many days were in there?
It was about, I would say, about 8 to 9 days, maybe.
Okay, so,
From the
yeah.
time I got to the 12th evac.
And they were stabilizing you,
More or less,
basically,
yeah,
and making
yeah.
sure,
When I was still, when I went to the third field hospital in Cucci, or maybe in Saigon, I guess that was.
yeah, it was Saigon.
Third field hospital in Saigon.
14th evac was Cucci.
Okay, so once I got to the third field hospital in Saigon, I was in a bed there, and I remember Lieutenant Colonel coming over, and he they awarded me my Purple Heart right then and there in the
Right then
bed,
and there.
right then and there. And then from there, I went to Japan, to the 249 General Hospital in Japan, and even I was there for about 2 weeks, and even then I didn't know if I was going back to Vietnam, because a lot of guys went back to Vietnam.
Patched them up.
Patched them up, they felt better, and they left and they went back to Vietnam.
Did anybody come and see you that you knew when you were still in Vietnam, like in Saigon or
Well, at the you said the 14th of Act, I thought it was the
That's where
12th
they
of Act.
took, that's
but
where they took you first, right?
First, yeah.
In Pucci.
Philip and Rick.
No kidding.
Came to the hospital. Well, to the
Yeah.
to the medevac area, because they heard what was going on.
Of course.
You know, and they saw me, and thank God they did, because they didn't know, you know, they didn't know who got wounded, who was killed, and whatever. And you know, not the funny thing, but the thing I remember is that I always thought Dick Glover was killed that same night, and that wasn't true. But I always had that impression that he may have died that night I got wounded. But he wound up getting hurt at Diamond 2, I think it was.
Yes, Diamond 2. April 5th, I think?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
right before he was supposed to come home.
Oh, unbelievable.
Yeah.
I've asked him 100 times, what were you thinking? He should have been
Yeah.
back ETSing out.
He doesn't want to hear that. You know what he says? He was accountable, he was responsible,
And the guys were there.
and the guys were there. That was Dick Glover for you.
Yep.
So,
So, when you saw your cousin and Rick,
right.
were you okay now? You're thinking a little better?
Yes, I was speaking more. I told both of them, but it looks a lot worse than it is, I think. But my
Yeah.
face was out like this. They had a bandage wrapped around me, like, you know, you have a bad toothache on one side, but it
Wow.
was. But they saw me and they knew I was, quote unquote, okay. So that was good. So Rick continued on his R&R. He met his wife in
Hawaii?
No, he went to Hong Kong.
Oh.
He didn't meet his wife. He went to Hong Kong.
Yeah.
On R&R, and Philip was coming back, and he went to Australia, I think, maybe Sydney or something.
That was a jackpot.
Yeah, and
That
he-
was a tough one
yeah.
to get.
And he was coming back from that, and he was going back out to the field the next morning, after the
Sure.
the 23rd, on the 24th, I guess it would have been. So he hooked up with the rest of the company, what was left of it, that next morning. So, but he finished his entire tour. He received the Purple Heart, my cousin Philip. Ricky should have gotten a Purple Heart, but that's another story, another day. He finished his 12 months, and during that time, I was when I left Japan, I went to the St. Albans Naval Hospital right here in Queens, New York.
Okay.
And that's where I was recuperating on my injuries. And
What were you thinking? You're laying here in Albans. Were you still thinking back to Diamond? Were you still thinking, I wonder
What happened?
Who made
Right.
it, who didn't?
like I said, the only thing I knew for a fact was that Rick was alive and my cousin Philip was alive.
Other than that, your
I didn't know.
imagination was...
I didn't know. Like I said, I thought Dick was killed that
Yeah.
night, but
Is there any word to describe what you felt like?
I think probably amazed of everything that went on, that just within that 24-hour period until I got to the hospitals, but just stunned, amazed. I didn't, I never knew how bad things could be in Vietnam up until that point. That was the worst action I think we were involved in up until that point in Vietnam. And,
So if I were to ask you what the worst day of your life was in Vietnam, that would be it.
that would be it,
Yeah.
February 23rd.
Yeah.
Day I'll never forget.
When you were at the hospital here in the States, did you have any more time to serve to meet
Yes.
your obligation?
Yes, I had about 9 months left on my tour.
What did you do?
Well, at first they sent me to. They asked me where I wanted to go. Okay, originally I had asked for Fort Hamilton, which is in Brooklyn, which would have been, 10 minutes away from my home. But
Yeah, that would have been nice.
that would have been nice. But they said no, Fort Hamilton's out of the question. So they sent me to Fort Dix, New Jersey, which is still, less than 90 miles away from my house.
Was Doc Turner there at the time?
I believe he was, but I didn't run into Doc because we talked about this once before, that he was in
Yeah.
Fort Dix when
Yeah.
he got back too.
Any of the other guys wind up there?
Not that I'm aware of,
Okay.
John. So I was pulling like battalion CQ, working nights and stuff like that. And I finally went to the company command. I said, "Listen, I can't be doing this for 9 months."
Yeah.
So he says, "Well, what do you want to do?" I says, "Anything but this." And he says, "All right, I'll assign you to a basic training company, okay, in Fort Dix." He says, "I'll make you an AJ, an Acton Jack." They gave me the stripe,
Yeah.
so I became an E5. And I was assigned to a basic training unit as one of the instructors, not a drill instructor, but one of the other instructors.
Do you know how wise that was? I mean, I'm thinking back. When you and I went to basic, and then we went to AIT, most of the AIT instructors were Vietnam vets.
Veterans, yeah.
And not one of them ever opened the Army book and started reading the Army.
Right.
The Vietnam vet instructors told the guys what it was all about
Yes.
and what to expect and maybe how to survive Vietnam. Do you remember that?
Yes, I
So
do.
the wisdom of sending, they did the same thing to me. I wound up at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And I never read the script. I never did. And there were old lifers there that said, you're going to lose a stripe for this if they ever find out you're not. And I said, hey, these guys need to know.
Exactly.
And sometimes it got very emotional
Right.
when I was telling them things.
No, exactly.
It got very emotional, but I never regretted a day.
No, I went through 3 cycles, basic training cycles, 8 weeks long.
Sure.
I was just assigned to the 1st Army Corps at that point, So I had one regular Army basic training unit, one reserve outfit basic training unit, and one regular, draftees or
Yes.
whatever.
Yeah.
So I remember the guys in the reserve, the kids I call them kids.
Well, sure
They were
yeah.
young, and the reserve unit guys, they just wanted to have a good basic training cycle. They were very inquisitive. A lot of them knew they were going to go to Vietnam, but they were good. They were good soldiers. They
Yeah.
weren't jerk-offs. Okay.
Yeah.
That was the reserve unit. The other one, the regular Army one, was another good outfit. But the guys who got drafted, they were a little on the rough side. But I managed to work through 3 cycles before I ETS'd in January of 1970.
And the day of your ETS, where did you go?
Right home.
Okay. To the
Yeah.
to the parents' home?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I was in. I had my car on base at Fort Dix, and I just drove. When they cut me loose, and I think it was January 18th. I think was my last day, and they cut me loose, and I just got in the car, put my civvies on, and I drove home.
Yep. And what was that like when you got back to the neighborhood?
Well, by then, thank God, I was already acclimated somewhat.
Sure.
From being home in the States already and being in Jersey, I was coming home a lot on weekends, so I kind of acclimated myself back to civilian life pretty seamless. It was a good experience. So when I got home, I knew I had a job waiting for me,
Which was?
with electronic data processing, the Ross
Okay.
Perot company, because they gave me, while I was gone for 2 years, they gave me $5 every 6 months raise.
Oh,
So
for
when-
heaven's sake.
So when I got back, I was making $20 more than when I left.
Wow. Hey, but I mean, that was a nice thing for
That was a
them to
nice
do.
thing to do. So, so I acclimated back home. My fiance was home, my ex-wife, and we were making plans to get married at that point in time. So I had the job. I went back to work. Funny thing was, right before I went back to work, when I was still at Fort Dix, I got to leave, I think, whatever, and I went into the city. That's where the job was, in New York City, in Manhattan. And I wore my uniform. And this is the first time I wore my uniform as a civilian.
Sure.
Getting on a subway train. And the looks I got, and I remember I was on the F train going into Manhattan, subway train, and a woman, she had to be at least 80 years old. She got up, and I'm looking at her, I'm holding on to
Sure.
the bar in the train, just holding on, and she said, "Would you like to sit down?" And I said, no, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, but you sit.
Yeah.
And finally, there was a guy next to her, younger guy, he got up and he said, would you like to sit? I said, no, that's fine. I'm getting off soon.
Sure.
So, but, I know a lot of guys remember bad incidents,
Yep.
when they got home, they were baby killers and, they were spit on and whatever. That really never happened to me. I have to admit, that really never happened to me. So, like I said, it was pretty seamless getting back into civilian life.
I'm curious. Did the guys, your buddies,
Right.
from childhood that didn't serve, did you rehook up with them?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, what was that like?
Well, I tell you, most of them did go into the service, eventually, all right? There was a couple that probably, for whatever the reasons were, never went in 4Fs or they were in
Yeah.
college or whatever. But, they all came to see me when I got home out of the hospital from St. Albans. And I went home on leave before I went back to active duty. A lot of them came to visit me at my
What were
mom's
the
house.
discussions like?
Just, how things were. And, it's hard to explain to somebody who didn't go through it with you, or didn't experience the same thing we experienced. And it was tough. It was tough. But
It was almost like the language didn't quite fit.
fit, absolutely. They were still kids on a neighborhood block.
And you weren't.
Here we were in the Army, and very regimental and
And a lot more mature the day you came home
absolutely.
than the day you left.
Absolutely. One of the fellows that we grew up with, he went in before I did. He was drafted. He went in before I did, and he got wounded. He was with the Americal Division,
Yeah.
and he caught a big chunk of shrapnel on the side of his head. And he came to visit me. He was already home. He got a medical discharge, and he came to visit me with his fiancée at that time, and it was a nice conversation with him because he went through.
You had something in common with him.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that was good. That was helpful for both of us.
When did you get married?
August of 1970. So I got out of the service January of 70. That following August, I got married.
Was it a big deal or not so big a deal?
It was a decent sized wedding. We had about 250 people at the wedding.
Did you say 250?
250 people, yeah.
Just kind of a, what did you call it? Oh, kind of a no big deal? Did I?
That's nowadays they have bigger weddings than that. 300-400 people go to these weddings. But yeah, it was a nice sized wedding, and
Did you guys have any kids?
yeah, I had my two sons with my ex-wife.
What are they doing? What are they doing these days?
Well, after I left Ross Perot, EDP, I went to work for Merrill Lynch. I was with Merrill Lynch in IT, information technology, for 38 years, okay? I got both my sons a summer intern job at Merrill Lynch at that time. My oldest son stuck it out. He's there 27 years now. With now it's Bank of America.
Yes.
They took over
Oh,
Merrill
boy.
Lynch.
Yeah.
And my youngest son left. He went to Chubb Institute, which is a technical school,
Mhm.
and then he got a job working for a company called Lafarge that make wallboards, commercial and residential wallboards. So they're both married. My oldest son Paul's married to his lovely wife Shelby. My youngest son Brian is married to Gina, and my best person in the world, my granddaughter, Sienna. That's with Brian and Gina.
Sure.
My daughter Laura has been there every step of the way for me. She did so much research on a disease I have. She's helped my wife immensely, and Donna's been my real rock since I was sick. But
So, when you came home, did you stay in touch with any of the guys from the platoon?
I met Rick Alley. I looked him up, and I was able to find him. He was living in Staten Island at the time, which is another borough of New York City. And we met one day for lunch. He was working for Metropolitan Life at that time, and I was at Merrill Lynch. And we went downtown. In fact, we went to a restaurant right near the old World Trade Center. And we had lunch. And he bought his book of pictures. I bought my book of pictures. And we exchanged, and we talked about different things. And we had a lot of questions for each other in regard to the guys that we served with,
Sure.
So I knew Eddie Fry was back home. He lived, at that time, he was still in the Bronx. I guess he got married, and then they moved up to, I think it's Westchester County, if I'm not mistaken, which is above New York City. Steve Truccini, I kept in touch with, and he got married, and then he moved to Georgia, Alpharetta, Georgia. And he's still there to this day. I see him on Facebook once in a while, and he'll always send me a little note here and there, how's things going and stuff like that. But he's one of the guys that really didn't want to get involved with any reunions or anything like that. And Eddie, I tried looking for him again, and I reached out a couple telephone numbers that I had, and there's no response there. So, but like I said, I did speak to him a couple of years ago. After you had found me, I had reached out to Eddie, and I told him, I said, we're having reunions and stuff. And he really didn't want to get involved either. He was raising a family, and so, but Eddie was only with us a short time, but maybe 2 months.
Right.
And then he got like a medical, not a medical, Red Cross leave, because somebody
Family
was...
hardship?
Yeah, family hardship. I think his mother was very sick at the time, so he was able to go back home. Steve wound up leaving the second platoon. He wound up in the third platoon, got wounded, and then I lost touch with him at that point.
He went to Fort Dix.
He did go to Fort Dix? Yeah. But he got wounded when he was with the third platoon, not with us.
I know.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, it's interesting because our guys were going to Fort Dix.
A lot of guys went to Fort
Dix.
Dix while I was there, so...
So it was sporadic. You didn't stay in touch with guys very much. What was it like when I called you on the phone?
I was shocked. Absolutely shocked. I had to make sure I listened to what you were saying, to make sure I knew exactly who you were again, because obviously after 40-some-odd years, you tend to forget. You try to put a name to a face, But
I think all I had to do is mention 2 or 3 of the things we were involved with.
Oh, absolutely.
And all of a
then
sudden...
I knew. Everything clicked right in. So, and the first reunion you guys had at Washington, and I wasn't able to go to that one.
By the way, do you know what one of the first things you said to me on the phone the very first time after you figured out I was for real? You remember what you said?
Yeah. Did we find Dick Glover?
Period.
End the case. And that, when you said no, not yet. And I know we had talked and said, we thought he had died at a Diamond, but you said you were at the wall and you never found his name.
I mean, it was kind of, can you believe that it was assumed? Because people had said he got shot in the head or
Something, yeah.
And the
Shrapnel,
last
whatever.
thing they know, he was being hauled out of there, and so that was the end of it.
Right,
So in people's minds, they went, well, he was gone.
right,
You know, they did, the same thing happened with Tommy Clark.
exactly. When
You know,
you put him on the
it was
medevac,
assumed, I mean,
Okay.
just, you know,
Right.
that there was no way he was gonna make it. So, and by the way, I was like you, the one guy that I wanted to find from the beginning was Dick Glover.
yeah,
And I went so far as to drive to South Dakota. I would find, do you know how many Richard Glovers there
Oh,
are
yeah.
in South Dakota? Probably a couple of thousand. And they're Indians. They're on the reservation.
On the reservation.
So I'm going, I know he was from, Wall Drug, because Willie told me that.
right,
Willie kept saying, I know he's from Wall Drug, you know, that town.
Right, right.
And so I called the mayor. I mean, I called the police chief. I called
The
and I
veterans
thought,
guys.
I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna go talk to people in person. So Laura and I got in the car and we made a road trip. And there was one Richard Glover in South Dakota, that fit the profile. And I thought,
you got him.
got him. And so we drove up, nice home, and I knock on the door, and this guy comes to the door, and I said, are you Richard Glover? And he said, yeah. And I could look over behind him, and the whole wall was filled with awards, citations, memorabilia, Army.
Right,
He was a Special Forces guy, 4 tours
wow,
in Nam. And I knew it wasn't Dick, obviously,
Right.
but he invited us into his home. And we went in there, and him and his wife were so kind to us, and I told him what I was doing. And he said, well, you know, I know what I would do is I'd start calling the tribes. And because they have lists of everybody that's on and you know, we always suspected Dick was an Indian, or at least part Indian, because he could see at night. No, I mean,
No, you're right.
he was so good in the field.
right.
I mean, I kind of assumed he had some Indian in him. You know, and now
Good
that,
assumption.
well, now that all these Glovers are on Indian, I mean, your mind will play funny tricks on you. So again, I started calling. You know, there are so many tribes in South Dakota.
Oh, I can
And then
imagine.
you get a hold of the person that has the list,
Right,
and I just I mean, everything struck out. And I finally printed out a list of all the Richard Glovers in the United States, and I used to just make a lot of phone calls.
Sure.
A lot of phone calls. And so, talking to Joe Wascom one day, and he says, how can I help you? He says, you are just doing this all. I said, well, you want to help me? Okay, I'm going to send you 680 Richard Glovers with phone numbers. And I just want you to call. And he goes, 680? He goes, how long do you think that? I said, hey, buddy, welcome to my world. And he goes, I'll do it. So I sent him all those 680 names. And like me, I never start at the top, because that's bad luck. You're not going to get a guy on the first call. So I,
Go down, right.
kind of mix it up. And 10 minutes after he'd started dialing, he called me and he says, I think we found him. And I go, yeah, right. And he goes, well, as soon as we hung up the phone, you know, my kid is really good in computers and all this and that and the other. And so he says, I just called him and I sent him the list. And I said, can you figure out a way so we can get this done faster? And so the kid called the first name on the list, and Mary Ann answered the phone.
Unbelievable. Imagine.
And the rest is history.
No.
And so he wasn't home. And of course, Joe told me, you know, his wife Mary Ann answered the phone, and so I got the number, and so I called.
Right.
You know, and Mary Ann was really confused, because, you know, when Joe's son, who was never in the military, let
Right.
alone the Wolfhounds, is going, oh yeah, we're looking for, you know, she's thinking,
Getting a little nervous, yeah.
you know, what's this all about? And when I got her on the phone, I started talking to her, and she put two and two together in a quick hurry, and she was excited. She goes, Dick is going to be absolutely thrilled when he
Right.
gets home. And so, of course, when he got home, he called the number that I gave her, and the first thing I did is start crying.
Yeah.
I mean, I heard his voice, and it was the same identical voice as it was in Vietnam. Not one
Right.
pitch difference.
Right.
And of course, he remembered who I was, and I started throwing Naso and Galley, and and he goes, do you know what? He says, I used to travel a lot. And every city I would get to, I'd go to a phone booth and open the white pages and look for Galley or Naso.
I know.
And he goes, never, and he says, I called, it was a Galley here, and Naso, but it was never the right one.
Right.
And he goes, I've all these years, he says, they haven't been out of my mind. I think about them every single day.
Right.
And I go, and so we talked about a few things, and I said, well, I don't want to cut this conversation short, but I said, there's a guy that has been bugging me and pestering me and has been on my back for like 2 years now to find you, and here's his number. And I gave him your number.
I know.
And I said, call this number. Do you remember what it was like when?
Yeah. When he said, Nace, I said, yeah. He said, Sergeant Glover. I said, oh, you got to be kidding me. I says, how'd they find you? And he told me the story,
Sure.
that big joke. And the first time we actually got together, which was very emotional.
Oh, I can't even imagine it.
Rick couldn't even call him on the phone. That's how,
Oh, I know.
taken back he was. We met at the fishing trip. That was the first meeting that we had with Dick.
Wow.
We met at the Minneapolis airport, and as soon as he saw us, he started to cry.
Oh, man.
Me and Rick were unbelievable. Mary Ann came over and she was hugging us. She says,
By the way, that was the first time in your life you ever saw Glover even get tears in his
Oh,
eyes.
yeah.
I mean, Dick was just
right, he was
tough.
really. And then the other time is when he came to the first reunion, and we did that little tribute to him. And his sons were there, Matt and Sam and Mary Ann, and he really got emotional that day too when we gave him that little bit of a tribute.
You bet.
We all spoke. But a great guy, a great friend. Like I said, he's called me every single day. John, no
That's-
exaggeration, every
that's
single
awesome.
day to see how I'm doing, So that's a great thing.
Well, you know what? You have a small taste of what you mean to him. You meant, when you guys were together in Nam, all the pictures I've got of you two
Right,
guys.
right.
And it's just like this.
Yeah,
All the pictures I've got some great pictures of field pictures
Right.
and it's always you right there with Glover.
yep.
So that was a real bond. You two guys really bonded with that. What is your definition of a hero?
Well, my first instinct or my first response would be the heroes in my life right now is my family, okay? They've been my heroes right now for everything they've done for me, especially while I'm going through this phase in my life with this disease. But I would say someone who was very responsible, was very accountable, and what comes to in my mind is a guy like Dick Glover, okay, and I'm sure he'd be the first one to say no,
Of course.
but he was my hero, okay, and he represented everything I would expect, or I defined as a person who
And
would be a hero.
amazingly, all of us feel the same way.
Same way,
Everybody
yeah.
that served closely with him every one of us would say the same identical thing that you're saying right now.
Right.
So, what does the American flag mean to you?
Well, it means our freedom. It means to me something we cherish every single day of our lives. And, you know, the veterans who fought, died, and still are alive to maintain that flag of freedom. I think that means a lot to me. My father, like I said, was in World War II, and he was patriotic. And you know, I'm not saying I followed in his footsteps, but I tried to do the best job I possibly could. You know, being a soldier, and but the American flag means a lot to us. It means our freedom, and it represents our freedom, and I salute it every day.
Does it irritate you when you see people disrespecting the flag?
Sure it does, okay? You know, I've had this conversation with my wife a few times, people who desecrate the American flag, and you know, it's something we fought for, you know, as well as fighting for each other.
Yep.
But it means a lot to me, and it does bother me when people disrespect the American flag.
What I want, we're getting down to the end now.
Okay,
You've got your grandkids.
one.
Okay,
My granddaughter.
You've got your granddaughter.
Special,
You've got your children.
that's correct.
Your little granddaughter someday is going to have children.
Right.
Those kids are going to have children. I want you to look in the camera and I want you to give them your best advice. What do you want your little granddaughter and the generations to come, what advice would you give them?
Just to be on a good track for life, to make sure that they're going to be okay in everything they do in life, and you know, my granddaughter and her children down the road, that they remember their grandfather. Okay, I did the best I could for all of them, and you know, I just want them to, you know that how much I really love all of them, and that you know, just do the right things in life.
Now, is there anything that we have covered today? Have I missed anything in this interview that is important to you, that you want on this interview, that I haven't mentioned or brought up?
I think you know, we basically covered everything. You know, I'm very close to the Wolfhound family. Okay, you know, I'd like to thank you and Timmy for everything you guys have done, and again, just, you know, a shout out to my family for all the support they've given me. Since I've been was diagnosed with leukemia, but the guys know who mean a lot to me,
You bet.
and you know, the guys have been great, and always, you know, always have been, and you know, again, a special shout out to Dick and Mary Ann and for everything they've done for us, and you know, my wife Donna and my daughter Laura and my sons Paulie and Brian and their wives Shelby and Gina and my granddaughter Sienna. You know, that they're my rock.
Final question.
Go ahead.
This is it.
This is it.
There's the camera.
I got it.
What has your wife Donna meant to you?
She's been everything in my life taking care of me. She's been there every step of the way. I love her so much, and I just, want my kids, my daughter to understand how much she really means to me in my life. She's been the perfect wife. We're married 27 years now, and she's been great. She really has been.
You know, we haven't done what we're about to do on any other video. This will be the first time, and you've watched a lot of them. But, sometimes we just need opportunities. And I think for you, you take as much time as you need. And again, I know we tell you to look into the camera, but you name off your children, and I know you love them so much.
Right.
If you could say anything to them, if you could just express anything to them, it's all yours. You've got as much time as you need to just let anyone in your family know.
Right. I just want them to understand that I tried to be the best father I could for all of them. Donna and I have a marriage that she had a daughter from her first husband. I had two sons with my ex-wife. We tried to bond as a family as best as we can, and I love them all. I just want them to understand that how much they all mean to me in my life right now. And my granddaughter's the joy of my life. She makes us smile, and she makes us laugh, and she makes us, my wife and I cry sometimes, but it's great. It's great having a grandchild. I wish I had more, but right now I have one. It's a good thing, and like I said, I love my family so much, and they've been great, to be around every single day of my life. So,
Paul, I cannot thank you enough.
appreciate it, John, I really do.
And I just want to let you know I love you.
I love you too, buddy. All right, if it wasn't for you and your son, these things are great, and I can't tell you how much this all means to all of us, all the veterans, and all the guys from the Wolfhounds. Watching these interviews has really been a joy and a pleasure. And like you said, it's something that's always going to be there for the next 100 years. So hopefully, my grandkids and their families and so forth and so on down the road, they'll know how much, how much I appreciate them, and I hope that they will find a way of appreciating me as being their grandfather.
And also, maybe equally as important, they're going to learn a whole bunch about their grandpa that they had no clue about.
Yeah, well,
Isn't that going to be something?
that'll be great.
Yeah.
It was like the one reunion where my son Brian and his at that time his fiancee Gina, my daughter-in-law now, Sienna's mom. When they first came to the reunion, my son really didn't have a real good understanding of what was happening, but he really appreciated everything. My oldest son knows a lot. My ex-wife really didn't want to know too much about my Vietnam experience, but Donna has been so inquisitive and so good, and there's an age difference between her and me, and she really, really, wants to learn and understand exactly what went on and what happened with, me and the rest of the guys and stuff like that. And she's been able to bond with a lot of the wives of the Wolfhound guys, which has been very nice. Good friends. I have good friends from the Wolfhounds, and we'll be friends forever.
Oh,
So,
yeah. Well, what you don't know is over the last few years, we've been getting with your wife and telling her the real truth
Okay.
about you and what you were like. So, but that's not for the video,
Okay.
of course. But anyway, that's okay, buddy. Thank you again.
Thanks, John.
And
Appreciate it.
God bless you.
You too.